Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the extent of the refugee scam and how the globalists are aggressively mass moving people around the world into the white countries, well, without the permission or consent of the white population, by the way, and they're doing so with vast resources and massive coordination between NGOs and various other groups, bribery and corruption, the United Nations, and then of course the public services of places like Britain and the United States are also complicit in it. So let's have a look. I mean, one of the things that we're advised that there are millions and millions of people escaping war and famine or whatever, particularly war, is these people are escaping, but their lives are at risk. Little babies dressed in pink, their lives are at risk, and you damn fascist fucking Nazi, you want to deny them. So that's the the propaganda that gets pushed around, and I notice in talk shows and current affairs shows how successful it is. Hey, do you want to deny little baby Sula in pink? Do you want to deny her? She's going to be murdered, ripped to pieces by the evil Nazi. So that there's a lot of insane and quite hysterical propaganda around that's choreographed and scripted and tested and ready to drop into these sort of things that tends to put the people that talk about the scams and the huge refugee scams that are going to, people that talk about them are sort of made to shut up by these ridiculous, bogus claims. And before you go on to any of these shows to talk about this, you have to have your responses ready that are equally emotive and equally decisive, as in kill shot type decisive as their claims are. Now they're relying on lies and untruths, just very emotional sort of hysteria. But come back to them with hard facts delivered in an emotional way, because you've got to fight on their terms to beat them, and beat them you must. But anyway, let's have a look at this refugee scam. Now, it's actually hard to get numbers on these things because the Western governments under globalist control, deliberately obfuscate this and try to mislead. And as you go through the pages of any report, they double count here, then half count on the next one, then they'll recount another set of figures. So I sat down and it didn't take me that long, but I sat down and crunched the numbers. Now, of the refugee applications coming into, this is the Greater United Kingdom, so this is the British Isles generally, so this includes Ireland as well. Now, only 14% of the refugee applicants, unless they're directly invited in, and this includes, by the way, quite a few of the Ukrainians. Excuse me. This includes quite a few of them, but only 14. So not even 1 in 6. 14% of the refugee applications come from areas that are at war, or have very recently been in war. So there may be a war-torn sort of infrastructure type situation there, but only 14%. So so this idea, these people are escaping war, they're escaping, and we have to help them. And if you don't, you're a heartless Nazi. That's bullshit, absolute bullshit. You can reject this out of hand. That's just propaganda lines. Now, more than half of that 14% from the war-torn areas were families. So, mother, father, at least one child. There's some speculation of whether or not these families are artificially put together in order to get some sort of priority and jump to the front of the queue. So there's no DNA testing done on these, but there should be. Remember, a lot of these people come from Islamic type societies where it's considered not only acceptable, but you're an idiot if you don't deceive the infidel. So it's not a bad thing to deceive the Christians and so on. If you can get them to accept your lies, then you're the smart one and they're the gullible ones. And so you're actually not offending Allah or the Quran or something like that if you do that. Indians take the same view, in fact. So as do many black cultures. Now, of the about well, a little over half of that 14% were families. Now, you would expect that if you're going to escape a war-torn area where there's chaos and mayhem and so on, it would make sense that you would take your loved ones with you. You know, your partner, your wife, and the children. I can fully understand that there's such a high number of people who claim they're escaping war but leaving their wife and children behind. I don't quite follow the mentality there. Some are saying that whereas they're not affected by war directly, that is, the war isn't outside their front door, the man's concerned that he may get called up to serve in the armed services, and so he doesn't want to do that, so he's running away to a rich first world country to escape. You know, I don't really buy that. Excuse me again. This hay fever. So anyway, a very small number of them are 14% are genuine refugees from genuine war-torn or recent war-torn areas. Now, of the refugee applications outside of that, about 70% of the refugee applications are from young single men. Now, they're coming from areas that are not war-torn, and they're making typically longer journeys. They're going through 10, 12, 13, in some cases even 14 safe countries to get to Western Europe. So that somebody like that could claim to be a refugee is absurd. And then I'll come back to in a minute some of the scams going on in background, sort of administrative type scams to facilitate this. But I also noticed that the majority of these people, by far and away the majority, come from refugee camps. So they're not coming directly from that country. They're actually going to a refugee camp. In fact, they're stopping off at a series of refugee camps around the world as they make their journey. So they're going from one safe place to another safe place to another safe place to another safe place, all the while collecting free everything, free transport, free everything, clothes, the whole lot. They're living, during their journey, they're living a higher quality lifestyle than they would in their own rural peasant village. So they must be thinking, wow, I've struck gold here. And again, these are mostly very simple people from third world countries. So anyway, so 70%. So this means about 85%, or the 14% that are genuine, and 71, 72% are just young men, just chances. They're just parasites, just going for the rich first world countries. They're not refugees of any sort. And even if they were refugees, they'll pass through 14 different countries and 10 different refugee camps to get to the what's that? That's not refugees. Far from it. Then there's a proportion of single women. Now there's a lot of claims that these single women are not really refugees at all, but are being trafficked as sex workers. Excuse me. I would say there's some truth to that. How many is hard. When I look at some of the women that claim to be heading off to a life of sex workers, it's hard to believe that anybody would pay to engage in intimate relations with them. But who knows? Maybe it's targeted directly at other third world people who are already in the West. So anyway, then there's others who claim to be children and so on. But if you look at some of the pictures of them, the idea that they're 16 years old is quite absurd. So there's really only, again, in terms of genuine refugees from genuine war-torn areas, then there's only a small number, again 1 in 6. But even here, there's a lot to dispute. They still have had to pass through a number of refugee camps to get to the West. Now they say, well, our old life is gone in the country we're from because of war or going on there. Now, I do accept that can be a temporary refugee status where you're allowed to stay in a safe country, but they could stay in the refugee camps. That would be fine as well. Let's suppose they make it to the West, the rich West, and they say, okay, well, I'm a refugee, and that's for whatever the reason that's accepted. Then the visa should be temporary. As soon as the war is ended, they have to go back. Let's suppose they argue that their old life is gone, that their houses are destroyed, they've got nothing there, there's their relatives have all been killed off, and so they've got nothing, and so they're coming to a new country to start a new life. Okay, let's accept that for a moment. Then the minute they get their visa or their residency, the first thing they do is go back to the place they've just had to escape from because their lives are in such danger and they've lost everything, and start making applications to bring all their relatives over to the rich white Western country. Well, hold on a minute, you said all your relatives were dead and you had nothing there. How can you now say you've got all these relatives? So that should act as disqualification. You filed false documents, you've made false claims in order to get or acquire refugee status. It's all bullshit. We now know that. So you can go back to the country where you came from. But that standard of behaviour and this idea that you have to be honest in your application, that doesn't seem to apply to these people. And they're able to, no matter how many lies and untruths they tell on their application, that's just waved away and it's accepted. And this really needs to be tightened up, considerably tightened up. If you apply to become a citizen or a resident of the United States through the proper channels, or any other country through the proper channels, you have to give correct information on your form. You can't make things up. You can't put falsehoods into that application, otherwise it'll be found out and rejected. Now, it's much harder to verify information or not in a war-torn country where it's a third world country where the sort of record keeping and public services that we take for granted in the West don't exist in those places. So it's very hard to confirm claims and details that are made. And I do understand that. But the burden of proof should not switch then to the first world country where you have to disprove the false claims made by a refugee applicant, which is the way it is currently. The burden of proof should still be on the person making the application. Now, the next thing, and this is quite disturbing, and I noticed this, that in the United States, various public servants, in the Department of State and so on, and Department of Home Services or Homeland Services were being interrogated about illegal migration and the many millions of people streaming into the United States, and who is funding all this? How is all this being paid for? Because it's vast sums of money, gazillions of dollars are being spent on moving these people illegally into the first world. And it's a globalist scam, of course, but nonetheless, who's paying for it all? And I've seen some rather inept politicians in the US trying to sort of nail it down, and I don't know whether they're really trying very hard or they've been specially selected to do the questioning because they're so inept and so fuddy-duddy or something. But I watched a few of these videos and they're able to ask questions of the home. Well, who's paying for this? And well, it's not us. We've got nothing to do with it. No, taxpayers not going with this. But instead, the government has given a large sum of money to an NGO. And it's the NGO who's doing it. So the government's, not us, nothing to do with us. Hey, we're not doing it. And technically, that's true. They're just paying someone else to do it, but by pre-arrangement. What is that pre-arrangement? What is the arrangement made with this NGO? Let me see that. Why are you giving them that money? What service are they going to provide where they're allowed to get hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money, US taxpayer money, and they're somehow front and center activist in moving all these people into the US illegally? Why are you paying these people paying this NGO to move people around illegally, to break the laws of you're paying this NGO to directly break the laws of the United States. Why is that not being chased? And if you look at the way that the whole people movement thing is broken up, there's a refugee camp there that's paid for by the United Nations. then there's a transporting the masses of people from one refugee camp to a next. Then that's another NGO does that. Then another NGO supplies the clothing, and there's donations here, which is tax deductible there. So Western companies can donate, thousands of sweatshirts or hundreds of thousands of sweatshirts or shoes or clothing or whatever, bottled water and so on, and then they can claim that as some sort of a donation, which then allows them to do a tax write-off on it. And all these things are interconnected. The tax write-offs, donations to NGOs, funding from this one NGO then pays another NGO to do something else. The United Nations does such and such, and it all interconnects. And all this money flows like a river throughout all of the Soros Foundation and so on, flows like a river throughout this entire infrastructure. And the sole purpose of this infrastructure is, of course, to move, mass move illiterate third world peasants into the West. And but each group can claim non-accountability. Well, no, it wasn't us. We didn't do that. Oh no, we didn't pay for that, because that's simply been outsourced or cross-funded or inter-funded in between one group to another, and it's a massive scam on massive proportions, and it's facilitating the movement of all these people illegally, illegitimately, without cause, without reason, into the West, because of the globalist project, and they are absolutely committed to this. That's why when Donald Trump says, "I'm going to stop all the illegals coming in, and by the way, I'm going to deport the millions of illegals that are in the United States," which could be, numbering, it's possible the numbers could be in approximately 30 million. That's when the globalists have an absolute meltdown and a seizure, and why they've got, in my view at least, why they've got hit squads running around trying to take him out, because absolutely pivotal to the globalists, above all else pivotal, is the mass movement of illiterate brown and black peasants into the white West. That is the absolute epicenter of their project, and they'll fight to the death to keep that going. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.